Hello and welcome back to Red Flag Teamfight Tactics. Today we will be doing something a bit different. Instead of trying to force a comp, I will end up just playing whatever chosen the game gives me. Typically this is the strongest way to play because you get the most developed champions, you get the strongest units, and you get to adjust to the game as it runs its course. One of the biggest advantages of the new set is that it is practically possible to play anything as long as it meshes well with what units you're putting on the field, if you get a good chosen for it, and if you have the right items for it, which means you can play almost anything, but you can't always play anything. For example, if you're not getting the units, even Hunter Moonlight, which is probably the strongest comp this patch, if not some combination of Dazzlers and Enlightened. Both of those comps can fall completely on their face if you don't run into the right chosen, if you don't get the items you need, or if you simply don't execute the builds correctly, if you don't put the champions in the back line, if you're not careful with assassins. Here we can see a Moonlight player who's actually the player who gives me the most trouble this game, already with 7 Dianas. This is a bit concerning for me, and it is the first time in any video that I upload that I don't start off the game with a win streak. I do level up to 4 in order to try to get a win streak going as soon as possible, because I believe early aggression is completely worth it, especially in this new set where it's a lot less common to get to level 9. It's almost impossible to get to level 9 unless you're doing very well, and it's a lot less common to get to level 8 as well. 7 is actually a viable place for you to roll down if you're not trying for top 3, top 2, because you're going to hit a lot of units and there's going to be plenty of people who just barely manage to get to level 8, and by the time they do get to level 8 they don't have enough health to stay competitive, or they're 1 HP and just immediately get knocked out. So you want to make sure you're playing aggressive typically, as in general it's going to give you a lot less bottom 2s, which is a one way of climbing. You could also try to prioritize top 1, top 2, top 3, but that is naturally going to happen if you play aggressively and you play aggressively successfully, and also just, you know, kind of what everyone's trying for anyway, so it's not really impressive to say, oh, I'm trying for top 2. Here we hit 3 sharpshooters, which gives us no additional benefit, but we have the Vayne that we picked up, we have the Jinx, and we have the Jhin, who is the main carry of this comp, all of them already doing work. Jinx actually brings a lot of utility to the comp this set because of the way that she works this patch. I'm able to pick up a nice pair of Jhins, and I will explain that Jinx fires a rocket every 50 mana, which means that the rocket additionally goes through people with the sharpshooter's trait. It does AoE damage like her old rockets used to. It does spell damage, but in addition to that, and more importantly in my opinion, it also stuns the target. So currently it's stunning 2 targets because of the sharpshooter rebound, but once I get sharpshooters up to the next level, it will be stunning 3 targets each time. I mistakenly believe that putting Irunaz on her will cause her to fire a second rocket that will also ricochet later on in the video, so if you want to clown on me, that's a good reason to. Fortunately, I'm able to pick up Giant Slayer, which is a really good item this patch later on, which allows her to apply on-hit Giant Slayer to 3 different enemies in each fight. The way Giant Slayer works this patch is it is much more appropriate that it has that name. It does 90 additional damage against targets with, I believe, 1800 or more health, and now does only 10% extra damage if they do not have that extra health. So it's definitely become more of a late game item, and especially with all the 3 costs that you're able to hit this patch, and with the importance of brawlers as a viable frontline, I think it's going to get a lot more use and is going to be just a higher rated item in general. As you can see here, we've picked up the Chosen Janna with the Enlightened trait chosen, which is going to give her additional mana. She's throwing out those shields. She's a 2-cost 2-star pretty early in the game, and that's going to be very effective with the Vi that I have as a frontline. I've put the Gargoyle's Stone Plate on the Vi, so that she is gaining 20 armor and magic resist for each enemy champion attacking her. In addition to this, those resists are very, very useful at making her health more valuable, and since shields provide effective health, the Janna shields that are landing on her with the Enlightened trait and with that tier mean that she is going to be much more tanky than she would initially appear. I actually end up swapping her out for an Elise because Elise has additional effective health in the form of recovering 40 to 70 HP on hit depending on her level. If I were to get a 3-cost Elise, it could be more than that, but I don't really see that as a realistic goal, especially not this game. At the carousel, I end up picking up the Jinx in order to get closer to that sharpshooter trait, as well as slamming a Runons on her, which I thought would be a great item to put onto her because of the interaction I mentioned with the rocket. And while she does do good additional damage and the attack speed does allow her to ult and thus stun enemy champions more quickly in greater succession, it is important to note that there is no rocket coming out besides the one that is rebounding here. You can see that double ricochet as I've gotten to 4 sharpshooter. Because I have such a good backline and because of how Gargoyle Stoneplate works on the Vi, it is possible for me to run a very, very weak looking front line that actually holds up very well, while having 4 sharpshooters means that every single auto attack and the effects coming out from the Vayne, especially the 4-shot from the Jhin, and the rockets from the Jinx are doing damage repeatedly. They're ricocheting twice. I think sharpshooters at 4 is probably ideal. I don't think there's a lot of added benefit to bringing the trade up to 6, and it does require you to have a chosen sharpshooter. Although the damage does increase pretty significantly, I think the trade-off is really between how much of a front line can you afford not to have. And especially in late game, there's better 4 or 6 champion carries than sharpshooters. So if you're going to be running a deficient little front line, it's probably necessary that you're running sharpshooters because you've hit a lot of the champions you need, or because you have just perfect items for the Vayne, for maybe the Jhin, you've hit a 3-star Vayne. There's a lot of reasons why this comp can be effective for you, but it won't necessarily be. And here's where I pick up a 4-cost Chosen. Now you'll notice that this doesn't really fit into my comp in any meaningful way. However, because it's Mystic that is the chosen trade, it's just immediate magic resist for my whole team if I place this Cassiopeia in. In addition to that, I don't really want to go for 6 sharpshooters, as I've said, and I'm currently at 5, which makes it very, very easy to justify bringing this Teemo out of the team and replacing it with the Shen, which means I have 2 ninjas as the front line. Because it's actually 2 of the same unit, I don't lose that ninja buff, and I get that extra AP on the Shen, which means a bigger shield. And having 2 Shens in there means that my front line is actually able to survive for a significant period of time. That Gargoyle Stoneplate is a very useful item for this kind of playstyle of a weak or small in numbers terms front line. Because Shen is placed as almost the only frontliner, or he's placed in front of the other Shen, he draws a lot of aggro and gets a lot of bonus resists from this item. At this point, I do have 2 Shens, which seems like it would naturally lead to me 2-starring this unit, and I have another 2 Mystics on the board. So I actually am running 3 Mystics at this time, and because of how strong AP comps are this patch, this set really, I'm not sure if that's going to change with the patch. I imagine there will be some balance, but you can see this Veigar, for example, is doing mostly spell damage, and there are a lot of comps in this lobby that are spell damage oriented because that is what is strongest this patch, especially with games revolving much more around chosen champions. It's easier just to build AP items and then flex them around depending on what chosen you get. Here we lose our win streak to a comp that I find really, really strong in the middle game, which is Galio at 6. It's difficult to get to 9 Galio, and this person will probably struggle as you need at least level 8 as well as the chosen cultist. And I actually know for a fact that that does not happen for this player this game. But I think it's a strong comp mid-game, and I expect to lose against that if I run into it with a cheesier build like this. I do manage to 2-star the Shen, and I'm going to explain that Vanguard item on him. It gives him 100 armor because it fills out the Vanguard trait that he and Sejuani share. In addition to having the 4 Mystic MR, he has, again, a lot more effective health because of that shield, and then he has the resists from Mystic and from Vanguard. He also has the bonus AP making his shield bigger because he is the only ninja on the field. And there is also 2 Dusk units, Cassiopeia and Vayne on the field, which are a bit like sorcerers in that they give the whole team a spell power boost. So you'll see the Shen is getting some very, very large shields, while the very numerous backline is able to deal with the enemies that he can face tank for a long time. Again, because he has the Gargoyle Stoneplate, he gets 20 MR and 20 armor for every opponent that is attacking him. So he gets a lot of resists and a lot of effective health points. It is a very, very strong front line despite not seeming that way. The Sejuani being level 1 still is also weak, but thanks to the pair we've picked up, hopefully we can indeed in the future 2-cost that Sejuani and have a very strong front line. Look at that Shen shield. It's just about 800 to 900 HP at this stage in the game. And here we are able to finally pick up a 3rd item for our Jhin. It's not ideal to have, but any AD on a Jhin, especially on one with that 4 sharpshooter trait, is going to benefit him and the comp greatly. Jhin is the main carry of this comp, and although he didn't get perfect items, Ginsu's is very nice, as it kind of lets him ramp up in the same way that Darkstar used to. Because his traits are different, but the champion itself is the same, it feels a bit different to play him, and the itemization is a bit different as well. Because as you can see, his autos just bounce now and end up doing a lot of damage. That MR ends up keeping him alive long enough to slow the Katarina down, but we lose our little win streak here again. Despite that huge Shen shield, we are bested. Another reason why I put the Janna in was I was thinking in terms of the shields offering greater effective health to my front line, and thought that it could be actually an underrated pick in this situation because it would make my front line that much tankier. I end up positioning my chosen Cassiopeia closer to the front so that when she ults, she's hitting almost the entirety of this guy's team. Remember to constantly be scouting your opponents, everyone in the lobby, and try to position your units based on which is the most populated side of the board or how they're distributed in a way that you can most effectively mostly hit them. This entire game is a numbers game, and it's about setting up the probabilities for you to succeed. Here we're able to pick up a Giant Slayer, which, as I said, is a great late game item from, I'm not sure if this is called Rift Herald, I assume it's not, but I'm not sure what the proper name to call it is. The Rift Herald gives us the Giant Slayer, which we will be sticking on Jinx, so that she can apply it to an additional unit whenever she auto-attacks with that Runan's Hurricane. This will really help us break down front lines that are composed of brawlers or 3-cost units, 3-star units, such as this one, where I will be doing an additional 90% damage in the form of true damage from everything that's coming out of the Jinx. At this point, I feel the game is pretty much won, and I actually began to BM pretty soon after this fight, because I think I've really pulled off a nice comp here. I think I've managed to integrate a Cassiopeia into a comp that she normally would not be considered in, and I think I've built up a very impressive front line with enough damage in the back to just win these fights. I would recommend always being willing to consider playing any 4-cost chosen that you see in your store, just because of how good the units are, how good a 2-cost, 2-star 4-cost is, and just how strong any champion could be, especially in the PBE, where everything is untested. There's not really a fixed meta yet, and we probably will only think we figured it out for a very long time. Here we can see what I'm talking about with the Jin ramping up over time. He actually manages to win this little skirmish with the Annie despite seemingly being about to drop, and that is a victory.